Peters from MomFit with Joe Peters. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network and the H.E.R Network on Single TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Single TV apps in their respective iOS and Android devices. While you're downloading, make sure to rate the app. The app is free. Single TV also can be available in your smart TV on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV, Roku, and Roku Stick in all the smart TVs since 2016. And if you are not following me yet on Instagram or Facebook, please take your phone and scroll and go to Joe Unicorn Coach and follow me. I handle my social media personally. So if you are having a question, a challenge, a concern about motherhood, send me a message. If I don't know the answer, I will find somebody, an expert like Michelle, that come to the show and help you, because our mission is help you to win the marathon of motherhood without burnout. I am very excited to have Michelle here today with us, because this is a topic that we don't have normalized. It's a topic that we don't talk much. It's something that is very painful. And I'm very grateful that Michelle is doing this work. Is about parenting after loss. Michelle is the proud mom of her angel sweet pea, who she lost to miscarriage, her angel daughter Colette Lewis, who she lost at 9 days old, and her only living child, her rainbow baby, Elliot Miguel. By the way, my baby's name is Elliot too. Spelled different, but it's Elliot. Inspired by her journey with Colette, Michelle and her husband found the Colette Lewis Ishdaw Foundation, whose mission is to improve outcomes of pregnancy, childbirth, prematurity, and infancy, as well as aid in the grieving process through final assistance, education, and advocacy. Their flagship program, Financial Assist Families Dealing with High Risk and Complicated Pregnancies, NICU Stays, and Loss. The organization's ability to help families relies on donations and grants that they are grateful if you are able to donate. So this is a perfect time of the year with the holidays. If you want to pay forward, please go on find. We will talk about where you can find Michelle and donate so Michelle can keep helping these moms that need it the most. Michelle also participates and advocates on issues of maternal health, maternal mortality, infant health and safety, and pregnancy complications. Michelle lives in Glenwood, Illinois, with her son Elliot, husband Mark, and dog Nemo. Michelle, thank you so much for being here. I'm honored to have
Thank
you
you.
here. We're going to be talking about your phrase. I ask all my guests for a phrase, and your phrase is there is no lemon so sour that something cannot be made resembling lemonade. Michelle is going to talk a little bit about your story, where you are, and why you picked that phrase.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I picked that phrase. It was a phrase I saw on a TV show before we had experienced loss, and really just spoke to me. And I thought about how powerful that is. That even on the worst case scenarios, we can really make something out of them. And it stuck with me. And then as we went through loss and we went through struggles, I kept kind of coming back to that and kept thinking about it. Um, and then I think, when we started this organization, that was kind of, I said it was our unofficial motto, right? Was that. And so it was taking the experiences, what we had learned, and keeping, you know, being parents and keeping our child's life as a meaningful one, and doing this. And it's something resembling lemonade, right? And, that's not to say that I wouldn't love that if I could snap my fingers, um, that they that my daughter would come back and I wouldn't have to deal with this, right? Like I would love that. That's not the hand I got dealt, unfortunately. And so how do I, kind of move on from that? And so that was really what I did. Yeah, my story is, it's kind of wrapped up a lot in my bio. But really it was dealing with infertility, getting pregnant on my first round of IVF, being thrilled, being excited that we were finally pregnant, and then miscarrying. And it's one of those things that, like, until it happens to you, you don't really know about it. And I think, you hit on it a little bit about saying that we don't talk about this. It's not normalized. And so what I found was that as I started to tell people about my miscarriage, and I kept that pretty quiet, but told, we had told family members. So, going back and telling family members that we had it, a few people at work that I had to tell, that kind of thing. And what I found was overwhelmingly people were like, oh, yeah, that happened to me. Oh, yeah, I had one. Oh, yeah, I had one. And it was like, where were you to tell me these things before it happened? And so really sitting in that and thinking about that. And then we went on. And so on our third round of IVF, we got pregnant with our daughter, Colette. And, pretty standard pregnancy. We made it past the first, like, scary first trimester, and, really thought it was good, thought everything was fine. And then a standard OB appointment, found that I had preeclampsia, and was sent to the hospital and was told I would be admitted until I delivered. And so, just as like a context, that was the evening of May 8th, and I wasn't due till September 7th. So, right? I mean, just like, yeah, right, exactly. Your look is probably somewhat similar to the look I had when the doctor's telling me this, and I think it was just very much, let me let me sit with that. But, all the questions that were going through my head, I mean, everything from, am I going to survive this? Is my baby going to survive this? To the mundane of, we don't have a car seat, we don't have a crib, we don't have anything, to all the stuff in between, which is really the bulk of stuff I think, we as moms have to deal with. Right. So it was like, okay, I'm here and I'm focused on this. But, what about, I'm supposed to be supporting a team at work. What am I doing from a hospital room? I was not expecting to do it this early, right? I was expecting to, continue on for a little while longer. All of those things. How are we managing this and how it looks, for the future, and all of that? And I think, really it was in that I started to really think about the financial piece, because I'm grateful every single day, and I feel so privileged that we didn't have to have that worry about finances. We could survive it. And I also knew how few families could. And so just thinking about how much easier the road was when we didn't have to worry about finances on top of everything. And so ultimately, I was in the hospital a little over 3 weeks before the doctors recommended delivery. And then I delivered emergency C-section, fairly traumatic birth, at 24 weeks and 5 days. And Colette was born and went straight to the NICU. In fact, were it not for my husband, who basically, very mild mannered husband, who basically, like, really got, forceful and said, she is going to go see Colette on her way to back to her room. They weren't going to take me there, and he insisted. But were it not for that, I probably would not have seen her until the next afternoon. And I'm always so grateful that he went in and he did that. And it's really scary to be a parent in the NICU, and to not know, and to feel like this is my baby, and also feel like, but I don't feel like a parent because I'm not controlling the schedule, the narrative, what we're doing, and all of that. And so, and I don't know what's going to happen from, day to day and minute to minute. And I was, really pushed over and over again to, you can go back to work, and save your time for when, she goes home. And just thinking, a couple of days postpartum, and anybody, who's listening, who's gone through any sort of birth, right? Could you have gone back to work at, 3 days postpartum? Probably not. Let alone I had a, C-section, and I was, barely moving around and all of that. And so really went through all of that. And then after 9 days, her lungs just couldn't, hold anymore. And so we lost her. And just, all of that is just, it's a lot for any parent to handle. And so, and it feels very lonely, very isolating when you do it. You feel like, although is far from the truth, and I've learned that since, you feel very much like that is you are the only person that this has happened to, right? Um, you are the only person. Mom guilt is a real thing, and so I felt very guilty that it was my body who, um, did do the right thing. So I felt very guilty. I still struggle sometimes, and we've been a little over 5 years now, with that guilt, and it's just very strange, and we don't deal with grief in this society very well, and we especially don't deal with grief when we're in these, moments where it's regarding babies dying, all of that, we especially don't deal with it, and so that's, a problem, and that's largely why I like talking about it, and yeah.
I am so moved with your story and so moved into you using that to actually bring normalization to this because I agree with you. Um, there is so many cases. I think I want to talk with you about how common this is. I was just this week seeing in a post of a mom going into a mom group saying that she was really afraid because she announced earlier her pregnancy on that scary first trimester, and it's almost like a taboo. Like, oh no,
Right,
you don't announce before the first trimester because if anything happened, so that make it feel like there is something wrong. And then if I
right,
announced before that, and then she was like, we are happy, and the picture was beautiful, and I love this mom because she was like, and if we miscarriage, I will have still the memories of the joy of me sharing about this and the
right,
joy of me doing all of this. So it's almost like I want to talk with you on that part of actually how we can help to normalize how common it is and how impactful it is, and start understanding why we maybe choose to not talk about it. And then, from your perspective of a person that lived through this, when a mom talk about it, how we all can support her and be around her, because that is the other part that like, oh, I don't know what to do. Some moms,
right,
like I had personal connection with two friends that lost their babies, and one of them want a lot of help and support, and the other one didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to handle it, didn't want to. She want to do it, deal it by herself. So I think that that is also another point into how we can prepare ourselves
right.
for that kind of support that they need in those moments. So how we can know how common it is and how impactful really a loss could be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's much more common than you think. So 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in loss. And so that's pregnancies, not women. I mean, 1 in 4 women is bad enough. But then when you sit there and say 1 in 4 pregnancies, that means that if you and your best friend each got pregnant twice, the likelihood is one of those 4 pregnancies is ending in loss. And that's a lot to put on moms and all of that. So it's happening constantly, right? And, you know, it's so interesting because I feel like I have been doing this work for, about 5.5 years. And I think I have yet to be in a meeting, in a call, in a training where somebody didn't have experience with it, and whether that be them personally or like you commented, 2 of your friends, having it. It's so common, it's so real. And I think we don't like talking about it because, we want, it to be, we want warm and fuzzies, right? We want to think that, having babies is amazing and wonderful, and it is, but there's also another layer to it. And so we don't want to do this. I think we also don't really talk about death very well in our society. And then when we talk about death and babies, forget it. Nobody wants to talk about it. And so I think there's a lot of that that's going on. Yeah, I have seen a definitely, I think I consider myself very lucky. I think that we are part of a generation that is starting to say, no, we need to be real, right? And real about everything, right? I just remember thinking, even in my pregnancy with Colette, when it was, normal, good, whatever you want to call it, I was sick all the time, right? So morning sickness, worst named thing ever, because I was sick from, morning through night. Um, and just remembering thinking, okay, where's this glow? When does that happen? When does this feel more like what I've seen it pictured and heard it described as? And then it's funny. People then said, I had a horrible time getting pregnant. Being pregnant, all of that kind of stuff. And I think, as we normalize a lot of that, including loss, I think that that's really important. And I think we have to do it knowing that we're going to get some resistance from some people. So, you mentioned about announcing early, right? And that's a constant, don't announce that early because something may happen. So with our son, our living child, we ultimately decided to use a gestational carrier. And so somebody else was pregnant, and we announced very early about our pregnancy. And part of that was we had lived our life kind of out loud and said it, and so we weren't going to hide away from it. And part of it also was I was having some experiences of loss of not carrying our child myself, and so for me, it felt like I needed a group. I needed cheerleaders. I needed, people who were really invested from the earliest possible moment. And so I did that. And I had people who said to me, "You're not supposed to do that. You don't do that. Whatever." And my feeling was like, I'm gonna do it, and it works for me. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine too. And I think after loss, it varies, right? I've known people who after loss don't really say anything until baby is here or until, very late in a pregnancy. All of that. And it's what works for you at that time in that pregnancy, you know, with whoever. And I think we need to just give people permission to make those decisions for themselves in whatever way it means. Yeah, I mean, the taboo about not announcing until the second trimester, I think is largely just other people don't want to hear about death. And so it's not about, protecting the family, the mom or parents or anything like that. I think it's about protecting other people who don't want to hear if something goes wrong. And so I think, all of that is really factoring into it. And it's really just, the same way that we kind of don't want to interfere in people's parenting and parenting choices unless there's something dangerous at play. I think we need to do the same thing for pregnancies and announcements and whenever, the family wants to do that. And I think that all of those are fine. And, oh, I can't hear you.
Okay, now I
Stop.
perfect. So it's very important to know about how we know that is different and can be approached like every other kind of trauma. It can represent itself in a different way. And the other one that I was smiling and remembering how much we need spaces like this and people like you and me to normalize it, that it happened with loss. For me, it happened with my fourth trimester. My fourth trimester was horrible. I had postpartum
Right.
depression, postpartum anxiety. And I also remember saying, when this magical love and amazing, I love my newborn and we are happy and this is the best time of my life is going to come, because I was just crying and feeling horrible every single day. So it's part of that motherhood and part of why we need that support team and that support structure to actually tell us ahead of time and be willing to talk and say, hey, I have a loss, this is what happened, this is what I feel, I had this situation. Now, what are some of the tips that you can share with the audience if they ever um, experience and are navigating lost, either from a pregnancy or from a child, and then how to parenting after loss?
Right. Yeah. I think The biggest tip I can give about navigating loss, if you are the one personally going through it, is, you know, I feel like I had always heard of grief in this sort of like straight line, right? We talk about stages of grief or whatever. So it's like, I experience this stage and then I move on and I do this. And that's not the way it happens. And it, in fact, it sort of looks more like, squiggles of craziness, So, um, it's grieve in whatever way you need that is possible, like whatever way you need at the time you need it. And if you're not doing yourself or others harm, whatever it is that you're grieving, however it is you're grieving, is the correct way, right? Because it works for you. Um, and so, there's no rule, but you're going to be told things. It's time to move on. You can't do that. I remember an experience with my mom where she had asked something about rules at the cemetery over decorating. She had asked something about it, and I said, "Oh, I don't know, but let me ask Mark, my husband, who at the time was going to the cemetery to say hi to Colette every day before work." And I said, "Let me ask him because he's been going more often." And she said, "What do you mean he's been going more often?" And I said, "Oh, well, he stops on every day on his way to work." And she said, "Oh, you need to put a stop to that. That's not good." And I said, I am not going to tell anybody how to grieve their child. And, I remember that moment, and I think, it was a learning lesson for both of us of it is important for us to grieve in whatever way we need to. And it's also important to realize the way I would grieve is very different than the way anybody else would grieve, right? And there's just different things that happen. And so like you acknowledged, two of your friends, one who wants to talk about it, one who doesn't, and that's okay. And so I think always as a loved one, it's, show up and say you're there for whatever they need. And that might be, somebody who wants to talk ad nauseum like I do. And that might be somebody who doesn't want to talk about it and everything in between. And they might change over time, right? They might want to talk about it and not want to talk about it. And, I have moments where, I don't want to talk about it, right? Where I just kind of am tired of being, the woman who talks about it all the time. And so sometimes I kind of just disappear behind it and I don't want to talk about it. And that's okay. That's where I'm at that moment. Um, and so, I think it's really just important to follow leads to really, recognize that this is a loss that is really intense and really powerful. And then that it's going to last a lifetime, right? It's losing your child. And it's not just, I didn't lose Colette at 9 days old. I lost Colette, as we go on. So, she would have turned 5 in May of this year. And so, that was really tough. Her 5th birthday was the toughest I think it's, we've had, because 5 is kindergarten, and it's, you really start to feel like your child is developing a true sense of identity and, a true sense of the world. And so 5 was really tough for us. Um, and that's not to say that it takes away from any of the other years being tough. The other years were tough too, but that one was in particular tough. And I'm sure that there will be other moments that will be, tougher. And that morphs and changes. And so it's like I've lost Colette at every stage, right? And there are triggers at every stage, and there are, things I see with my son that, there's these moments of joy and gratitude and love and all of it, right? All the stuff that we experience in motherhood. And then there's also in those moments, a lot of times there's grief, right? And so it's, my son is 3 now, and it's, seeing things, and it, he has this very, fun personality. And there are moments where you sit there and you think, what would Colette have been at this age? What would it have been like if he had an older sister in the house? What would that have looked like? All of those kinds of things. And I think that that's also really powerful. My top tip always to people who support lost parents is take the words just and at least and just scrap them out of your vocabulary. Because, I heard a lot of like, you should just be grateful for your son. Yes, I am totally grateful. I'm thankful every single day that he is part of my life. But here's the thing: at the same time, I also grieve because I should have other children, and that's okay, and they can coincide together and often feed off of each other, right? I'm very grateful that I had 9 days with Colette and that we had that. I'm very grateful that I was the one carrying, so I had, the private moments pregnant people have with their babies, right? That we talked, and that, there was a song that I sang to her, and so that I have that song when I need it to remind myself of that connection and that love. Those kinds of things. Like, I'm very grateful for all of those, and I also am grieving, and I also am, struggling with this, and there are days where I am very angry at this, where, it feels this, and some of the feelings are just difficult to navigate. Um, and the other thing I think, you talked about parenting after loss, um, is that, I've lost any innocence and naivete, right? And so I think that a lot of parents sort of, yeah, things can happen, but you don't really want to acknowledge it. And so you're able to sort of compartmentalize and say, yeah, that happens, but like, I don't need to worry about it right now. And I live in the worst case scenario, right? And so, it's very hard. And just thinking, a couple weeks ago, my son had RSV, right? He was fine. He was not, he was a little sick, and he was sent home from school with a fever. I insisted upon going to the doctor. I insisted on the test. And sorry, the sun keeps moving in my house, so I keep having to kind of adjust. But he was fine. I mean, the doctor said his lungs looked good. It was all of that, and yet I know RSV can be scary and can lead to death. And so, you know, in this, just the normal mom thing of making sure he was okay and providing him comfort, had another layer to it that came from loss, which was I had to keep stepping back and saying, okay, he's okay right now. Like, you don't need to go to the worst case scenario. But it's what you do, and it's really hard, and it's really complicated. And I'm always striking this balance of, I don't want him to pick up on my anxiety, and and to have that as a growing field and all of that. But I'm really careful. I am super careful about safe sleep and all of that. And so I knew all the stuff, and I did it, and we followed it very closely because there was that fear all the time of losing again. And I think that that's also really powerful in parenting after loss as well.
And I that this hit me really deep because of my PPA. Even now, like yesterday, my son has 2 years and a half. Yesterday I woke up and he's done sleep through the night, and I feel that anxiety and panic of what if he is going to be then. And then even now I have to go and check, and I'm sharing that because that is another part of judgment of
Mhm.
motherhood, and is that we don't know, and it's not our business to know what other mom is going through for her to be the way that she's parenting. So a lot of families like, oh, it's going to be okay, oh, you are exaggerating, oh, you are such a pessimist, it's going to be okay, or you are overreacting. And it hit me now when you were saying that we don't know. No, like there is a lot of people. I also talk with everybody. So a lot of people in the
Mm,
show, that millions of people know that I have postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, but the mom in the clinic or the mom in the park may not to have
right.
that reaction. The mom in the childcare or the teachers don't know completely your story to have that understanding. So how much we can also show grace and really remember that we actually don't have a clue, and we should not, of that mother journey that shaped her to feel how she's feeling with her living children, and the fear that she had and the anxiety that she had. So that
Right.
is very powerful. One of the things you were start talking about this, one of the things that I'm hearing you say beautifully and over 5 years is the concept that I'm very aligned with. And I think that is not only with grief and loss, but for us as a whole in motherhood and as women, is it's a journey. It's
Right.
not something like, it's not like a school where you graduate and that's it and you never had it again, or a job that you quit and then it's gone. But it's a journey, a spiral up, where sometimes you handle it better, sometimes you don't, sometimes things hit you harder, and then almost normalizing that it's okay to be aware of that and don't be ashamed of that, that there will be things that will um hit your heart deeper, and you're going to be like, oh, I was not expecting this to make me feel so much pain.
Right.
And understanding that there is nothing, I want to hear your opinion, there is nothing that you need to fix, because that is
Mhm.
part of what this society is brainwashing is, okay, this happened and then you need to get back in your feet as soon as possible and get to
Right.
therapy and heal your grief and then get pregnant again and then have another child. And that is still the journey of you honoring that, because the reality, especially for or us moms, is there was a part of you that died. Like,
Right.
yeah, for a dad too, but the way that our cells and our DNA mix with the baby, and how the cells of the baby become the mom's cells, like literally it's something perpetual. So
Right.
how we can honor that journey and how we can actually put boundaries around that journey, so that we don't get in the trap of shame or guilt of what is wrong with me that is being this much time and I'm
Mhm.
still feeling this, or I'm still on this stage.
Right. I think it's educating people. I think it's, the more that we talk about and we share our stories, the more it becomes normalized on its own, right? And so, I think that that's very powerful. To your statement about grief as a journey, it is. And grief really is love, right? And so at no point do we ever tell a parent, well, you need to stop loving your child, right? We would never ever tell a parent that. But somehow, when a parent has lost, there is a lot of, well, now you need to move on. Now you need to go to the next level. And it's like, no, I don't. No. And so, very much so, I say, unless, obviously, and I'm always going to preface this with, unless somebody is doing harm to themselves or others, however they are grieving is what they need at that point. I'm a huge proponent of therapy. I'm a huge proponent of, and that's both individuals and couples. If you are doing this, I think that that's really important. I'm also a huge proponent of, some version of a support group, right? And that can look like a variety of different things. But I think when you go through loss, being with other parents who have also lost and had similar stories is just so powerful, right? And I have, an ongoing chat with three other lost moms. I do attend a group and we have, meetings, but I just have a chat. And if you look through it, most of it is just like, hey, I had this experience today and it just sort of really triggered me, and I just I needed to say this. And there's something very powerful in being with, and this, this exists across the spectrum, right? This is for moms and all sorts of things, right? Moms who are grieving, who are dealing with high needs children, and moms who are, trying to work and do, the so-called work-life balance, all of that. Like, we need the other support to say, yeah, what you're feeling, totally get it. 100% get it. And it doesn't solve anything, right? When I'm saying these things, when I'm messaging with my lost mom friends, when they're messaging me, we're not solving problems. We're just normalizing and saying, yeah, I get that. And there's something really powerful in that to say, that is. But it's the grief and the pain never go away. And I think trying to force it to go away, or trying to um, force others to, compartmentalize it and send it away, doesn't end. And the story that I always like to tell, for me, it's both sad and I think eye opening. So my grandmother had, as far as I knew, had three kids, and was doing fine and whatever. And in her later years developed dementia. And so my mom, as her caretaker, one day was on the phone with my sister and I, and was just sort of venting as a caregiver, right? Just having those moments of just like, this is really tough. This is, difficult to manage, whatever. And, letting her vent and doing that because there's a lot of power in that. And then she said, and yeah, she woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning screaming over, "Give me my baby. Why won't anyone let me see my baby? Let me see my baby. Let me see my baby." And she's, venting. And I let her vent. And then when she sort of took a pause, I said, "Mom, did she ever have a loss?" And my mom said, "You know what? She did." She said, "And the only way I knew about it was um, my sister was 8 weeks premature, and my great grandmother, so my grandmother's mother, came into town to help with everything." And she said, she told me this in passing. She said, "Well, hopefully it doesn't turn out the way it did for your mom." And she said, and I didn't really think much of it. And I just sort of, had it at the back of my mind. And so what happened was that she had had a fourth child who was a stillborn. And, back in the day, the protocol was to take baby away really quickly. And so parents wouldn't see the baby. And so, she starts reliving the experience that she must have had of saying, "Bring me my baby. Why won't anyone see my baby?" All of that. And I think, one, it explains so much about my grandmother and how she was you know, as herself and as a lost mom. It was sad that she never got to experience that, and it was sad that she went through that experience in dementia. And I remember talking to a friend of mine, also a lost mom, who worked with Alzheimer's patients and just kind of getting some tips and some strategies with her. And I said, "I just really hope this never happens to me." And what she told me really stuck with me. She said, "If it does, everyone in your life knows who Cled is, knows who Sweet Pea is, and they can talk to you through it." And so she said, "But you didn't know anything. And so you couldn't have those conversations with her. So you had to make it up and figure it out and do that." And so, I often think about that and think about, here was somebody who, decades later, it still was with her. And that's, I think, very eye-opening to say, it doesn't go away, right? And so we can hide from it all we want, but it's not going away. And um, and I think that that's also a really important part. For people who shame you, people who make you feel guilty, I mean, maybe they don't need to be in your life. That's really my thing, you know. And I've seen that. It's another loss. I have seen people who couldn't handle me talking about it, who are no longer a part of my life, or not as involved in my life. And I think that that was a conscious choice, on both of our ends in some way. It's take me as who I am and who I am as a mom, and I'm a mom of three. And yes, I only have one living child, but I am a mom of three still. And so if you can't handle that, then you don't really need to be in my life. And and I think that that's hard to make those decisions to do that, but I think it's so important.
And I think that that is so important for us moms and females, that we try to be the people pleaser and that we try to be the good girl. And with something like grief and with something like losing your child at any point, because there is also that part, and you experience both, but there is also that judgment of which one is worse. Like if it's a miscarriage, well, you didn't saw it, it was early on. But the reality is it doesn't matter. It's
Right.
your child. And it's your child since the moment that you get a positive in the pregnancy test.
Mhm.
But then it's also important that we care about ourselves and say, I am already handling more that a human person should ever handle with this excruciating pain. I should not have to be worried about how you are feeling, how you are taking things, and how you are reacting. And
Yeah.
on that one thing that struck me so much, and thank you forever for this, is grief is love.
Mhm.
I like that is probably the biggest haha for me. And it's like you say beautifully. If we never ask a mom to stop loving her child, how dare us to expect and think that a mom should ever stop grieving their child. I have a memory when I was in Alabama. The executive secretary that support our team had lost her daughter, and I decided to start bringing flowers to her for Mother's Day. And I remember the first year that I did it, and she just bawled because she said that for years nobody say anything to her.
Right.
Nobody say Happy Mother's Day because people were so afraid to hurt her and to make her feel sad that didn't. And I was like, well, you are a mother and we need to celebrate Happy Mother's Day. And I did it for
Right.
years and years when I was there. But it's that part of being acknowledging of that journey. Now, I know that grief is very complicated because, like, when we are talking about postpartum or we are talking about pregnancy, there is a lot more tangible things that we can say, hey, family, friends, do this, don't do this. But with grief, it's very individualized into
Mhm.
how each person is doing grief. With that being said, what are some of those things that people can do, and how, what ways they have to support those lost parents without overpassing boundaries? Like, for example, I make that mistake, and in my own pain of seeing that person that I love going through that, I was trying to help in the way that I thought that it was,
Right.
not the way that she needed, and that end damaging our relationship forever. um so how we can have that perfect balance of still help without overpassing, but not go to the other extreme of putting our head like the ostrich in the sand and just
Right.
ignore everything.
Right.
What are some of those things that we can be mindful of?
Yeah, I think it's, it's stepping back and really listening and really following their lead, right? So, if you have somebody who refers to their kids, all of them, whether they're here or not, and really acknowledges that, then that's okay to then acknowledge them as well. I think the Mother's Day kind of thing, that's a beautiful thing. I remember being so incredibly touched my first Mother's Day after Clet, that people acknowledged it and people said Happy Mother's Day. I didn't have a living child at that point, and people said it. I love now that I do have a living child, and that, but that people acknowledge that Mother's Day is a complicated thing for me, right? Because yes, I'm loving it with my child, but I'm also grieving my other kids. And I'm grieving what could have been, and, all of that. I think it's really following people's leads. I think it's asking, um, and doing things. I think it's just simple things. I mean, we live in such an age of technology. You know, Sometimes just sending a message, and you don't even have to acknowledge it, just saying, I know today could be a tough day for you. Um, so just thinking of you, goes so far. So even if you have that friend who's not really going to talk about it, but who might feel that way, on a Mother's Day, on a birthday, on a, special day, on the holidays, whatever. I think that that's really important. I think it's letting them know that you are there for whatever they need, right? And so is it that they need somebody to really check in and to say, all sorts of things, then do that. And then, and see how the reaction is. I think it's also providing that support and not putting conditions on it. So, I will send messages that say, I don't need a response. I don't need anything. I just wanted to let you know I was thinking of you. And sometimes I get a response, sometimes I don't, and that means a lot. We had family friends who went through a loss, many years before we did, and one of the things that I found beautiful was that, mom, lost mom to lost mom, she would just send me things like she'd send me a text message with just a heart, right? Um, it was so simple, and it was so appreciated to get those moments of, somebody is thinking of me and somebody is thinking of what I'm going through. And then it's following their leads. What do they send? I send, I have all four of our names. I typically don't include Sweet Pea, for various reasons. But I send it with all four of our names. I send cards. And so, when you acknowledge then, sorry, I'm really not having a good day with lights here. But when you acknowledge, I think when you acknowledge it and you reframe it back in the way that they've like sort of set the lead. And I think it's totally acceptable to ask and to say, do you want me to include, your child in your family when I, kind of acknowledge it, or do you prefer me not to? And to really follow what they're saying, what their lead is. I think that's really important. You know, I think the simple things that you do, like, saying this, I mean, it was so beautiful when you said to me that you brought flowers to your coworker. And I thought, oh my God, what a beautiful, like, acknowledgement. And an acknowledgement that so many people don't get. Um, that was beautiful. And yeah, you're right. It could have been that she would have been like, nope, I don't want this anymore. And that's okay. I think if you're doing a simple thing and then you are sort of reassessing, and you can even say to somebody, was that okay? Did I overstep? And they will largely tell you, no, you didn't. It really meant a lot, or yeah, you did. And I really just don't want that kind of attention or whatever. And I think it's really important um, to just listen and to hear those things.
Thank you so much, Michelle. As we are wrapping up the program today, I would love for you to say, if you could just send one message to all these moms around the world that are facing these loss and that this grief of their pregnancy, of their children, what that will be, and then also how they can learn more about you and how they can connect with you and how they can see how much resources and help you have available to help them to go through this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say you are not alone. Um, there is a community that finds it. You sometimes may have to search a little bit to find your part of that community. Um, it is the crappiest club to join. It just nobody wants to join it. But when you find those, fellow club members, you find a really supportive, wonderful, beautiful community. And I think that that's really important to find that, whatever that looks like for you. And it looks different for all of us. I would also say grieve how you want to grieve, and do it in whatever way you want to. I think that that's really important. Um, yeah, I feel like there's like 6 other things I wanna say, but I'm gonna stop there. In terms of finding me, ColetteLouise.com, so it's COLETTE Louise.com. That's our website, and from there you can find us all on the social media platforms as well. My email is Michelle with 2 L's at ColetteLouise.com. And, um, really we have a bunch of resources. We have, places that have support groups. So if that's where you want to start and find something, let's do it there. You can always send me an email and say, I'm not finding what I'm looking for, and I will try to get you, connected in the best way I possibly can. And yeah, I think, it's really just all of us finding our resources and finding people who can help us through the journey.
Thank you so much. And for all of you that are listening, if this resonate, if you have somebody that experienced loss or you experience loss and you want to help other moms and help Michelle in her mission of normalizing this and support moms, please consider going to ColetteLouise.com and donate in this season so she can expand her reach. Michelle, thank you so much for having us, for being here with us. Thank you for all the work that you are doing and for taking this painful, excruciating experience and making it something magical to help others. Thank you so much. And for
Thank you.
everybody that is hearing, make sure that you are following us. If you are not following me yet, go to Joe Unicorn Coach on Facebook and Instagram. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and leave it.